All right, welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast. Today we have a very special podcast, one that I am super excited for, and it is a smallmouth panel. I told you guys I'd be doing these panels. Eventually, I've done one previously where we talked about random topics in the fishing industry, but today it is primarily focused on brown, bronze goodness, smallmouth bass, the one fish that we all love so dearly, so much around the country. Um, Not that we neglect our largemouth, but something about a smallmouth just makes an angler tick just a little bit more. So today I have a few gentlemen joining me from all over the country because we're going to split this up by regions and talk about how smallmouth behave, act, the whole 9 yards. We're going to really get into it and digest these smallmouth bass around the country on this podcast today. From the Northeast, I have Mr. Casey Smith. From the Midwest, I have Benjamin Nowak from the Smallmouth Experience. I have Austin Wilson coming from the West out in California. And now from the South, I have two guys representing us from the South, and that is Mr. Caleb Bell and Mr. Alex Rudd. Um, you guys can go and look down below in the description all these guys' personal podcasts they have done with me one-on-one. You guys can learn about them and their backgrounds a little bit as well. But today we're going to use their expertise as a group and collectively combine them, talk about them as a region, and bring up some pretty good points, I think. I think there's going to be a lot of good information come from this, and it's going to be pretty exciting to see, what there is said and, the knowledge dropped today. So looking forward to it. Hope you guys are too. Let's get started. All right, we are recording. It's kind of a different podcast today. I got more than just myself and one of you guys. I got a whole group. My introduction, I told everybody how we're doing a smallmouth only panel where we're talking about the different things smallmouth in different regions. We got you guys all over the country, and Austin, you're probably the warmest of all of us here over in Cali. How you doing?
Yeah, yesterday.
What's that?
I said it was 94 degrees here yesterday.
What?
Yeah.
Sheesh. How you guys doing down in the south there, Caleb and Alex?
It is nice down here. I mean, it was what do you think it was today? I mean, it was a little bit rainy today, but yesterday it's every bit of 75, 78 degrees, something like that.
Yeah, dude, it was gorgeous yesterday. It was a great day.
Nice. Ben, how you doing over there in Michigan? Probably similar to us.
Yeah, we're finally starting to get some warm weather, like 50s and 60-degree days, so things are starting to get pretty nice here.
Nice.
I bet y'all are killing them.
Yeah, Casey, we're good now. This weekend looks pretty nice. It looks like we're getting 60s.
We're good. I like it when it's a little cool. I don't want 94 degrees. I'm good with
Yeah.
that.
No.
I
At least
can't do
have to
94.
deal with the humidity. It's pretty dry here in Cali.
Yeah.
I can't do 94. No, anything over 80, I get uncomfortable. I like the motto of, when it's too cold, you can put on layers, but when it gets too hot, you can't really do much about it besides AC.
Well, Alex would disagree.
Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, I asked if it was okay if I got naked at some point during this podcast. Listen, you live in the South long enough, and you have one of those 94-degree days where it's 100% humidity. It feels like you're wearing a jacket when you walk outside. You gotta get naked. I mean, I live far enough away from everybody; they'd never know I'm naked.
Get the nice slimy slick coat going on your body.
That's
disgusting.
Go full
That's the
Neanderthal.
worst.
I like it.
That's the worst. Before we get too sidetracked, obviously this whole podcast is based on smallmouth. So let's go around real quick. Just a quick question of, what do you love most about a smallmouth? So I guess we'll probably start alphabetical then. So Alex, if you want to go first and just tell everybody, what do you like most about the smallmouth? What draws you in the most?
Probably this aggressiveness. So it is the meanest fish on planet Earth. I mean, well, next to a spotted bass, but a smallmouth seriously is. They're and we'll get into this later on in the podcast, but like our fish down here, especially southern smallmouth, and Caleb can vouch for this.
Oh yeah.
They're just they are insane. They go insane. They unload on baits like nothing else unloads on a bait. I mean, they are just a completely different animal when it comes to bass fishing down here, especially.
Awesome. Austin?
Yeah, I think the same thing. They're just so aggressive. Obviously I fished out in the East Coast. Obviously I live here in Cali, but it seems like everywhere I go, just how aggressive the smallmouth are. Like spotted bass are pretty aggressive, but man, those smallmouth are mean, especially if you get in a river system. Oh, with a long current, those fish fight so.
Amen. Now there it is.
Yeah, preach, brother, preach.
Ben, what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like the best of both worlds. They're fun because they're such a challenge to catch. Like largemouth are pretty predictable, but like smallmouth, especially in the north, move around so much that they're like a pain in the butt some days. Where when you actually go out and you find like a big pot of fish, I really enjoy like that puzzle of putting together and being able to like stay on top of and follow those fish a bunch of different places. So I mean that's a big thing for me.
Cool. Caleb?
I think for me, a lot of the same stuff that everyone said so far, but one thing that drew me as a kid, especially when I started to catch smallmouth, around here, they're not as prevalent, especially when I was a kid. Like a lot of the lakes around here, there weren't huge populations of them. They've really come back as the spotted bass populations have diminished in our lakes. But just that look like that, especially those ones that are almost black, bronze color. They have all kinds of crazy colors, chartreuse, war paint, red eyes, just a really cool looking fish. And you combine that with their natural mean instincts. And it's crazy to me, especially Alex knows I do a ton of river fishing specifically for smallmouth. And those tail raised fish, like they are a completely different breed of smallmouth. Like your hook to land ratio some days just is terrible, especially in warm water like this, because as soon as you hook that fish, they are literally tail walking all the way to the boat. You cannot keep up with them with a spinning reel. You can barely do it with a bait caster. It's absolutely
preach,
insane.
my man. They are pretty fish.
Yeah, I love it.
Casey?
Same thing. They're mean. They're aggressive. They're dumb. Most importantly, where I live, Fort Wheeler, Bailey. That helps. The way they look is cool. There's nothing better than standing in a weigh-in line and looking in a bag with a bunch of big, giant, tiger striped smallmouth. So same thing.
Yeah, so guys, tune in next week. We're going to come back with group D, E, and F since we just went through A, B, and C.
That's funny.
Sorry.
So beyond the knowledge of you guys, one reason I also picked you guys to help me with this whole smallmouth panel is pretty much all of you have fished almost all over the country. Majority of us, north, south. But Austin, obviously, you've done all freaking corners of the country being in Cali. But, and we can't really go through this every question alphabetical, so we might jump over each other a little bit. So that's okay. We'll figure it out. But, biggest behavioral differences you might see from fish down south to north to even out west.
Oh yeah,
man. I mean, they're all aggressive. It's kind of hard to say. It's the river systems that are just the most aggressive. But it's smallmouth is smallmouth, just like a largemouth is a largemouth. They hang around in grass. You find boulders, chunk rock. Which I feel like that's where they're gonna mostly hang out. So. Out here in Cali, we have a big mixture of all three species. And if you have, I guess we'll talk about this a little later. I don't really want to jump into that right now. But, I don't know. I mean, since I've been all over the place, it seems like they're pretty similar, like how, like, where you can target them, that's just the way I think about it, I have a pretty simple mind, just go fish and try to, pattern them, I mean, this is the way I think about it, since I've been all over the country.
Anybody else?
Yeah, and I'm curious how much like tournament fishing affects that too, right? Because like I don't necessarily tournament fish, right? So I just go out and I either target smallmouth or I target largemouth or on like mixed lakes, which I was on yesterday. I knew if I went like past the first third of that creek, I wasn't catching a smallmouth. But like if I stayed in the first third of that creek or like at the mouth where there's some rock or mixture, I mean, it's fair game for either fish.
I think it's funny how wildly different and the same a lot of our smallmouth fishing is around here. I know Alex and I, so we have a lot of these kind of highland reservoir, super deep, clear lakes, and then we got these tail race fisheries. So the tail race, it's always changing. The water flow, depending on the current, those fish move around, but typically it's big line, big rods, moving baits, stick them in the face and get them to the boat. Whereas you can go straight up to Norris Lake, and in the wintertime, you're throwing a grub on 2 or 4 pound test in 50, 60, 70 foot of water and catching big smallmouth down there. But it's the same thing like you were saying. It's like it's rock, It's current. They kind of sit in the same areas, but it's crazy to me how different. And Alex, like you go to Norris and you catch those fish cranking shallow too, especially if the water's a little color to it. So I mean, it's weird.
I'm curious because a lot of you guys have fished up north as well, right? Like Caleb and Alex, you fished lakes that I fish. You came with me and fished them. So like some of those bodies of water where we were catching smallmouth, how much does that relate to what you guys do down there, especially reservoir style lakes, right? Where Caleb, where you and I went fishing and we were skipping a jig and I ended up catching some smallmouth skipping a jig. Like,
Yeah.
does that fish at all like Chickamauga, right?
No, they don't do that there. They don't get on docks, and they get on bluff walls. So again, even Chickamauga, even though it's a reservoir side, it's the main lake side. Those fish, they position themselves like river fish. Most smallmouth on these lakes stay main lake. They stay on bluff walls, especially, and chunk rock, main lake points. They very rarely. There's a few creeks that they move into, but the catalyst for that is they're very deep creeks. They have the same thing. They have bluff walls. They have steep rocky banks, and that's where a lot of these fish. It's funny because the largemouth they'll pull all the way back into these tributaries and creeks and spawn. The smallmouth they spawn early and they only pull to like the first third of the creek, where those really deep channels stop, and then they'll spawn right there and then they're out again.
That's interesting.
I'll tell you one humongous behavioral difference that I see between our smallmouth and smallmouth that I fished up north is our smallmouth don't like sunlight. Like they're like vampires. They want to hide under rocks. They want to get up under something. And a lot of the times with those bluff walls, you'll find them, up under an overhang, like where a bluff wall's broke off. That's where that smallmouth wants to be tucked up under there. They want to be under something dark, and they bite better when the sun's in. Like, I know up north being like, we went fishing before and the sun comes out and we catch them better, period.
Yeah.
But down here, like, the day that me and you went to Norris Bend, I told you the shittier the day, the better the smallmouth are going to eat. And when the rain really started to move in and like set in and it got dark and crappy outside is when the brownfish started to show up. And which I find that very fascinating. That's one humongous behavioral difference I've definitely seen between our fish and your fish.
Casey, what do you think? Is that kind of translate over Northeast?
Yeah. I mean, I think up here the sunnier and windier it is, the better they bite. I mean, I've had good days on cloudy days, but they like the sun, and the catalyst to the sun is the wind. If it's sunny and slick, then you're going to have a little bit tougher time unless you're maybe dropping deep on boulders or something like that. But for me, if it's sunny, it's preferred to have wind.
I'm with you, Casey. I agree, man, especially on like our glacial bodies of water, even like our inland lakes. All of our places, even the tannic bodies of water, right? So like that tea-colored water, if it is sunny and slick, those fish won't bite. But like if there's some wind, they will come up and smash it. And I think it has to do with like visual feeders. Even on Norris, which is a clear lake, Alex, where you're catching those smallmouth, is dirty for up here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Whereas in the wintertime, though, when I'm on Norris catching them with Will and his buddies out there, Frankie Dopel and stuff, those guys are hammers out there, and it is super clear in the wintertime. You're talking about 25. To me, it's clear, 25-foot visibility plus.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me how deep those fish will sit. And I think a lot of that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, I think a lot of that's because it's a striper fishery as well. There's so many big striper in there that I think it displaces those smallmouth deeper than they would normally sit. It's just wild to me. I mean, they catch them in 70, 80 foot all the time over there.
Yeah, and
Austin,
I think...
Oops, sorry. I was going to ask Austin to give us a rundown on what they do in California, or like what they do in New York, Bailey. Like, what are those fish doing that,
like in a river system, where they're hiding and stuff. I feel like not necessarily eddies, but I've seen them like out of the current, just hiding in boulders. And then you have our lakes that those fish get out on the flats where there's kind of some chunk rock or some boulders or whatnot. But fishery that has multiple species like largemouth and spotted bass, I feel like the smallmouth are definitely harder to find. Like you can't target them because some are like you can catch the smallmouth the same area you catch. We're not spot out. I'm not trying to see the eddy, the just behind boulders or whatnot. And then some are smaller that have some trappers in them. there's not very many smallmouth at all because I believe the stripers.
I think the
hope somebody-
connect's failing on you, buddy.
We're losing you, bro.
Yeah, I hope somebody's
I-
take some notes. I got boulders, is what I heard. I heard definitely something about boulders.
I got one bar of where I'm at, so great. So can you guys hear me? I still got one bar.
I can hear you.
Yeah, you
I
hear you
can
now.
hear you now.
A little better.
Well, I only got one bar, so who knows if I'm going to even stick around. Might even drop the call. Yeah. Trying to walk around, trying to get a couple more bars here. I'm still getting one. Anyway, if you guys can hear me,
I can hear you behind the
back
truck,
to
better
river-
in front of the truck.
Yeah, can you? There's a little bit more. There's a little wind, but now can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Anyway, back to the river system, where the fish, are kind of hiding in the rocks. You're not just they're out of the current too. I mean, they're in the eddies and stuff, but where there's bigger blocks, it's harder to target on some of these lakes. And most of our lakes have all three species, and you just can't target. You can't target the smallmouth because you'll catch largemouth and spotted bass in the same general area. And then I forgot where I was going. This is probably what I said earlier about.
No, I was curious about that too.
The river system that have our stripers, the smallmouth are a little bit what? Curious about what? Aluja?
No, about like how on largemouth, smallmouth fisheries, like mixed fisheries, how the smallmouth are reacting or acting in comparison to like just smallmouth only fisheries, because our smallmouth only fisheries are so much different than mixed fisheries.
It's an interesting question.
They still, they're still in the same general area. Like you still find them around boulders and spotted bass. They're still aggressive, but you'll catch the other two species with them. So like you'll cast out there and catch a smallmouth, and then you cast back out there, and you catch a spotted bass, and a few casts later you catch a largemouth. They're kind of all just mixed in. Either even though they kind of don't like each other in some fisheries, I feel like sometimes you won't find the spotted bass near the smallmouth, or you don't find the smallmouth near the largemouth. They kind of butt heads almost, But at least that's what I think. But and they don't, not like back east. Our smallmouth don't get as big. Yeah, you can catch some 5 and 6 pounders, but that's a good one, I don't know if it's just something the gobies or whatever they eat. Because we have the warm water for those fish to grow. Kind of like the largemouth. We have so many big largemouth here, but it's weird how up east, back east, northeast is those fish get so big. With the water being so cold. But I kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I kind of second what you were saying. Like, I find a lot of times our largemouth and smallmouth will get on the same areas. Like those smallmouth in those mixed fisheries don't seem to be as nomadic as they do on, glacial bodies of water, even on the Great Lakes, right? Like those styles of bodies of water just seem to congregate those fish a lot more with other species of bass versus like glacial bodies of water where they're so nomadic and pelagic, like chasing bait fish constantly. Yeah. Just super interesting. Bailey, I'm curious about what you're doing though. I'm like, Cayuga up there. You're smashing them.
Yeah, so I brought Casey on here. I invited him on here because Casey knows these northeastern smallmouth 20, 30 times better than I do. He's been at it a lot longer than I have. But I think one thing we can agree on, though, is that they're very structure-based, and then usually in the summer months, they're pretty hard to find on certain bodies of water. And with that being said, like you said, how certain lakes, there's largemouth and smallmouth, you will find them generally in the same areas on those structure. Just because, New York, we have these big, they're just essentially, lakes are just bowls. They're just bowls of just grass. And so it's generally when you find structure, you'll find both species. And that's essentially what it's going to be. But Casey, can you expand on that at all?
Yeah, up here we have all different realms. We almost have different strains of smallmouth just here in New York State. We have Great Lakes smallmouth that are, similar to St. Clair and Erie and all that, they're deep water fish. We have fish on Champlain and Oneida that will mix right in with largemouth. Those are grass lakes. And then we have finger lakes, smallmouth like Cayuga and Canisius and Cuca Lake, that those fish, they'll come in shallow in the spring, like, the way Bailey's catching them now. You're catching them in 10 feet of water or less. They're pre-spawn or spawn. And then in the summertime, they go out and get pelagic on alewives. Those lakes don't have gobies in them. So we have 3 or 4 almost different types of fisheries and types of smallmouth just right here alone.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like we have some of those lakes where, like Ben, in one of your videos with Alex, how you only could find them using Panoptics. Essentially, some of our lakes do the same thing here, where you can only find them right in that line, just chasing bait the whole summer.
Now, like, what are you guys doing right now? I know it's kind of like, as smallmouth fishermen, I think we're a little bit different than largemouth guys who are like, well, you just go throw a worm. Like, it's kind of secretive, but at the same time, like, what are you guys doing to catch these fish?
Fishing shallow right now. They're just up on rock banks, shallow. I mean, this doesn't even have to be a flat. It can be main lake stretch, just anywhere there's rock, shallow. I mean, it kind of over the course of the years, you just kind of learn where they go into, and they go there year after year after year. So it's rock related and it's shallow. That's the only 2 common factors, really. And if you get in a lake where there's a million of them, then they can be literally on every shallow rocky stretch.
Yeah.
So I find this interesting. Now that we're just kind of on this topic of where they're at, I know me and Caleb, like when we target smallmouth, whether it be in the tail race or if I'm on main lake stuff, like our smallmouth, Ben, when I fish with you, we're throwing jerk baits, drop shots, Ned rigs, little shitty stuff that I don't like to throw. Me and Caleb are throwing 6.5-inch plastic, paddle tail swim baits. We're throwing
20-pound test.
20-pound tests. We're throwing jackhammers. We're throwing. I mean, I've got on smallmouth in the winter with a 10XD before. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just a forage deal that our smallmouth are targeting big gizzard shad. I mean, we both experienced smallmouth spitting up bluegills and crappie, and you go down like Pickwick and Wheeler and all those lakes, those fish are primarily eating crappies and bluegills and really big bait. You think that's what's playing into it, or do you think it's just it's almost like you say they mix together and it's just they're used to bait that size, so they're taking a swap at it. Like I find that very interesting too.
Ben, wasn't it Lake St. Clair where I think it was Oliver Nye caught a smallmouth on like a 10-inch mag draft phone for muskie, something like that?
Yeah.
Ben,
No, that was that was up by us. And the deal up there is they're eating big perch, right? So they're eating like 9, 10, 12-inch perch. So when he throws that 9-inch bait or 7-inch bait, just smash it. And I think it has a lot to do with forage, Alex. And it's the same way up here. Like I can throw an A-rig and catch smallmouth because they're keyed in on those 4.5-inch bait fish. And that big presence of an A-rig actually draws them to it rather than scaring those fish away.
That's a good point, Ben. And here's my theory in the tail race especially. We fish this when our current is ripping a lot of times. And you're ripping down the bank, so the current's actually pushing you. You do drifts. You can't hold with spot lock. You're running, 3 to 5, sometimes even 7 miles an hour downriver, and you're making short, quick casts at an angle on the bank. To me, the main reason that they hit these big swim baits, I've got a buddy that's been catching a lot of them on a big 7-inch Scottsboro line through as well. They hit moving baits, bigger baits like that. I think it's because it's just like a drawing power thing too. If they can see it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It draws a few more fish a little bit further, and it's like they're so mean. Those river fish are. They have a split second to make a decision if they're going to eat something.
But what's fascinating? Go ahead, man.
I think here in the Northeast, anyways, they're extremely territorial too. So they get off the spawn, and it doesn't matter if you're on Champlain or Ontario, and you throw. I've thrown big Hud swim baits and stuff by a boulder in practice when I don't want to catch them, and they'll follow that thing all the way to the boat. So it's just that becomes a territorial thing for sure too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially on those little lakes.
I think it's all about, I think it's all about the bait that's in your body of water, because we plant a lot of trout here, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen a smallmouth just T-bone my HUD from on glide out here, and just it just all matters. It depends on what kind of bait you have in your fishery, and if that's the main forage or not. Like I said, most folks plant with trout, so I mean, I how many had this T-bone, and they can't quite get it in their mouth, but it's cool to watch them try to eat it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So Casey made the point earlier of talking how smallmouth are dumb. Generally, if you're around them, there's a good chance you can get one to commit. But best seasons, in your opinions, best seasons, time of year to get on them, and then the worst time of year to get on them. What would you say?
Oh, dude, best time of year is like right now, up until they start to spawn. I hate catching them off beds. I mean, they're stupid and they're really easy to catch on bed, but like I just hate it. So like right now till they spawn, and then again like late September through the end of the year.
I've got a controversial one on this.
Uh-oh.
Some of my favorite times to catch big smallmouth here is the dead end, most miserable part of the summer in September. We get on a crazy bite on the low end, and I don't even know what causes it, but it's like a crazy topwater bite around marinas. These fish pull in around marinas. You can catch them on big topwaters and big jerk baits, like the biggest jerk bait that you can throw out there, the biggest topwater you can throw. And I'm talking like going out and smashing like 20 pounds. And they're skinny summer smallmouth. You know how big our smallmouth are, like 22, 23-inch giant smallmouth that are skinny. And then we get on another crazy bite, and I know Ben and I talk about this a lot, but the mayfly hatch, like our mayfly hatch is dynamite for big smallmouth fish. It comes in usually like July 4th. You can pretty much count on it. It's going to be some of our biggest hatches. And we can go out and absolutely wreck house. Daytime, nighttime, doesn't matter. But you guys say it's tougher for y'all. I mean, I can go out and I can confidently say I'm going to catch 20 pounds smallmouth like every time during the mayfly hatch.
Oh, no.
Yeah, see, that's what it's so different.
Casey?
The hardest time of year to catch them is easy. It's winter when there's ice on the lake. The rest of the year, it's pretty much have at them. I mean, spring is fun because they're shallow and they're aggressive. The spawn, I don't like the spawn either. I don't like to fish from on beds. We have to at Champlain for tournaments a lot. Post spawn, I would maybe post spawn, I'll say, is the toughest realistic answer, where they group up and they kind of they're just in small wolf packs. They're not in big schools and they're still semi shallow. That can get a little tough sometimes. Summertime, I mean, on the Great Lakes, summertime is one of my favorite times because they're deep, they're on shoals, you drop on them. A riot on the Finger Lakes, summertime can get very, very difficult because that's when they become pelagic. So that can suck too. But fall time is unbelievable up here. The fall time is hands down my favorite time because they're deep and they're aggressive as they are in the spring, but they're deep, 20 to 50. And I like to fish deep. I don't like to fish shallow, especially the way we have to do it in the spring. Fall is my favorite for sure.
Awesome. Austin? You there?
Our lakes up in the Sierras, man, they just chew during the summertime. I don't know what it is about it. And then obviously the river fisheries in the summer and fall they're just current fish. I feel like they're just easier to catch. But spawning, like it's harder to target them for here. For most of our lakes around where I'm at, just because you have all three species. You can come across them, but like I said, I don't fish for them that much. On most of our lakes right around here. But the summertime and I guess in the fall, it's probably my favorite time to fish for them.
So now's the big question that I was most curious about your guys' opinions of is, now there's two strands of largemouth. Do you think there are two strands of smallmouth? This is one that Alex brought up, so I'll give him the credit here. But I'm very curious your guys' thoughts on this topic.
Yes.
I've gone back and forth on this. Alex and I have talked a lot. And I'm like, talk to Alex, and I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Dude, I don't think so.
No,
I really don't.
Listen, okay, let me lay out the argument, okay, and then we'll debate. Because you got to lay out the argument first before you can talk about what's actually going to be talked about here. So, Caleb, back me up here. Our smallmouth are built completely different. They look completely different. Their mouths are completely different. Their tail shapes completely different. If I caught a 5-pound smallmouth down here and showed it to you guys, and then caught one up at Ben's house and showed it to you guys, you would see two totally different fish.
Yeah.
And I really believe, and I have done some research into this, asked some fisheries guys around here, smallmouth that live here are naturally here and have been here for thousands of years, right? And they've lived in the river systems around here. Now, by the blood work and genetically, they're the same fish, right? But there are variations there, like variations in between. I don't know, a butterfly that lives in one part of the rainforest and lives in the other part of the rainforest. And the only thing that separates them is a color or something like that. It's that kind of genetic difference. But I'm telling you, just the build, the overall nature, body language of our smallmouth is completely different than anything I've ever seen up north. And like Ben, we've studied pictures. Like we've literally set, like you've been driving. I'm like, look at this fish. And then, okay, now look at that one. You see how different they are? I mean, there's definitely a difference there, I believe.
My thing is, too, I think it's specific to the Tennessee River system.
Absolutely.
Tennessee River system smallmouth, they're weird. It's like the difference between a Kentucky spotted bass and a Alabama spotted bass. If you've caught both of them, Alabama spotted bass kind of reminds you of a striper. It's a torpedo. It's extremely fast, very sight-oriented fish. Whereas a Kentucky spot, short, fat. They kind of look like a Guadalupe bass. That's why they're distinct. And I think it's the same way with our smallmouth. They're long, they're torpedo shaped. They have massive tails. Even when they get fat, for like my dad, the biggest smallmouth that he caught right in front of me. The thing was only 6, and it's like 634. The thing was almost 26 inches long.
Good grief.
I routinely catch 24-inch smallmouth here that are 4.5 pounds.
I mean, heck, I caught one the other day that was 4.5 pounds and I think she was 25 and 3/4 inch. If I remember it right.
North and even that's the thing, unheard of up north. But even if we go to our deeper clear lakes, it's not like that either. Like you go to Norris and they're not the same. Cherokee, those are not the same. They're
Norris
more like
fish. Yeah, the Norris fish are built like northern fish, and because my understanding of that is that those fish were stocked there from northern strain smallmouth because they wanted them to be those bigger, bulkier smallmouth. Where the smallmouth that live in the Tennessee River system came from all the tributaries that up in northeast Tennessee. You go to northeast Tennessee, there's a lot of culture around like the Demeke rig and smallmouth fishing, and all those fish have that riverine look. They come from the rivers. They're natural smallmouth that have lived in shallow rivers their entire life. I mean, some of these smallmouth that I catch on these kayak floats that I go on, I catch them out of a foot of water, and they've lived their entire life in a foot of water, eating, crawdads and gizzard shad and everything else, living in this turbulent environment. And I think it has distinctly made them different. They have definitely, they've just adapted to that environment. They've had to. They've gone from football to torpedo so that they can sit in that current and they can effectively kill in that current.
I agree.
So I think so here's the reason that I disagree initially, and I still disagree.
Wrong, man. It's okay.
No, but like my biggest thing was when I was fishing this fall, I started to notice, especially in our river systems, how long and narrow these fish were. But I really got to thinking like, that's the difference in habitat versus difference in species, right? So like our fish in the river system are long with giant tails, but you can still catch like a 4-pounder that weighs like 22 inches. But the reason they don't get to be 25, 26 inches and 4 pounds is because we only have a 6-month growing season versus like a 12-month growing season. And our forage like doesn't move all year long. So our fish only grow 6 months out of the year, and that's why they live to be like 25, 30 years old.
Yeah.
Whereas your fish live like 12 years, and you got a 5.5 pound fish.
Mm-hmm.
Our fish is still like not even done starting to grow at that point.
Yeah, that's wild. That is a cool difference between northern fish and southern fish.
Yeah, I think Casey and Ben, you can speak for it too. If we caught a fish over 24 inches, that was a smallmouth. I mean,
It'd be
you're,
8 pounds.
you're looking at the record books for your state. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have, I mean, Bailey, you know this, and Austin's probably seen this too at Champlain. We have both. We have the fish that you guys are probably used to seeing on TV with short, fat St. Lawrence goby eaters, but we also have, Bailey, you know what they look like at Canisius. They're long and skinny and have big eyes. And if you've been to Champlain and you fished in the Rouse's Point area and you've caught some of those, they are the same thing. They are long, skinny, big tails, and big eyes is the defining part because those fish chase bait in open water all summer like they do on Canisius and probably like they do a lot on the Tennessee River during the summertime and those East Tennessee lakes. So we have both right here for sure.
Yeah.
I think that big eye thing is super interesting, man. I've never really thought of that or heard of that, but like now that I'm thinking of it, like our river fish, their eyes are enormous for their little head.
Yeah.
Yep.
Champlain, there's sections of Champlain that they have huge eyes, and there's sections that they don't. And I'm sure of it. I've heard Brandon Polnick say the same thing actually when he's gone up there, that they have huge eyes, specifically in the Rouse's Point area of Champlain. And for sure, they roam open water in that section of the lake more than the rest because of the lack of offshore structure, middle of the lake offshore structure there, for sure.
Dude, someone needs to
What do you see,
advocate
Austin?
for. I would love to see someone advocate for some genetic testing to be done to see if those fish have literally adapted to their environment and
I think
changed.
that's really what it is. Whether you call it it's a separate species or like a hybrid, whatever you want to call it, I think it's cool as crap how these fish, no matter where they are in the country, it's like microevolution. They have figured out how to adapt to that particular area.
And
I
you're
want to
talking
talk
about
about something. Why has no northern state come up with like a trophy fish program? Right, like you have Tennessee or
Yeah.
Texas and Florida. Like no one's tried to invest in making like a hybrid smallmouth that will get to be like 9 pounds. Instead, people are
Yeah,
like,
they're called Lake Erie ones.
yeah, Lake Erie or Great Lakes
Lake
smallmouth.
Erie smallmouth.
But like you got these G2s and you have the Florida strains. Like, come on, guys, make a giant smallmouth.
Austin, what do you see over there? Do you see the same thing we're talking about with
we
the short
definitely don't
fat?
have that. I mean, a
Yeah.
6 is a really big one here for
It
sure.
depends. Yeah, I definitely see that, but I see obviously river fish are just more like lean. They're super lakes where there's a lot of fat. They're not fighting current their whole lives, And I've definitely seen that when I fished Chickamauga. I caught some smallmouth out of there. They're just lean. It just looked like a different species, two different breed of smallmouth. I never thought about two different species of smallmouth until this panel popped up, and now thinking back to all the fish I've caught, you can definitely see a difference for sure, and there's definitely a difference here too in our lakes and our rivers. They're like a 2 different strain of fish. I mean, obviously they're the same, but they're a little different. That's for sure.
I wonder if this topic has ever been brought up to like a fisheries biologist, and I should have thought about that to bring some of them on, like somebody in that position who might have.
I'm working on that, dude.
Yeah.
Like I am wanting to ask these questions to like an actual biologist who's in the field doing all the genetics work and crap, because I want to know. It fascinates the hell out of me to know the genetics of our fish.
So here's a question for you guys. Now, I know Alex knows a lot about this, but around here, we have a crazy nighttime smallmouth bite. On our clear lakes, in the tail races, anywhere, our fish eat like sharks at night. In the wintertime, summertime, it doesn't matter. Which is, to me, again, goes back to the kind of the light thing. I noticed we talk about up north a lot, how the sun plays big for smallmouth up there. Here, I'm telling you, nighttime, it could be bitter cold, 20 degrees in the wintertime. As long as the lake isn't froze over, you can still catch smallmouth at night. Catch them on hair jigs, spinner baits, anything that'll thump. Still catch them on, you can catch them on chartreuse and white crankbaits at night. Here, you can catch them on chartreuse swim baits at night. I mean, they are sharks at night. It's when a lot of the big smallmouth get caught around our area.
Casey, have you ever gone out and gone night fishing here?
I never have. I think on the podcast I did with you, you said you have though, right?
Yeah, I've gone out here in some of our lakes where it gets real tough during the summer months when they're hard to locate, and like Casey said, they're pelagic. And I've gone out, and they go up real shallow at night, but you won't catch them until it's at least midnight, 1 in the morning, and you're throwing like a whopper plopper or a chowpo, and that's the only thing they'll hit. And like I've tried spinner baits, chatter baits, they only want something on top.
Timing is so important at night. You talk about windows we have around here. For some whatever reason, like 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning is dynamite, and then about 2 hours before daylight, that there's like a magic window there for whatever reason. But you guys
dark.
In cooler water in the fall and stuff, you guys should try some, especially smaller lakes, so you can break down pretty easily. You guys should try going out at night.
I'm curious on this, man. Like, Dirds is one of my best buddies, and he is insanely technical about some of this stuff. And we've been listening to all these podcasts talking about like major and minor feeding windows, especially at nighttime. I'm curious on how that plays because we got to talking about some of his largemouth night fishing and how like when the moon is like straight overhead, the ability that these fish have to still see even in nighttime periods.
Yeah. I mean, new moon is dynamite nighttime fishing for us. I'm talking like it is black,
dark,
like it's cold out there, and those fish will literally try to take a rod out of your hand at night.
And that's what I was gonna say. Is like primo nighttime smallmouth fishing for us is new moon, back of a cove, trees overhead, so damn dark that you can't see your hand right in front of your face, and like those smallmouth are just. And it's crazy to me with the accuracy that they can hit something. Like it'll be so dark that you're literally fumbling all over yourself trying to catch a fish, and they're smoking a swim bait so deep that you're having to, cut the swim bait off and dig it out of their gullet. I mean, it's insanity to me how those smallmouth function like that.
One of the biggest nighttime smallmouth baits for us too, which is crazy to me, is literally a small hair jig with a pork chunk trailer. It has no thump, no action, and those fish, they find it and eat the crap out of it. It's a small brown grub. And I'm talking, it's a brown hair jig that we use at night. And they find it and they eat it.
That's interesting.
I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I think, honestly, here's what I think. I think the lead from those things ticks the rocks. And just that little, it's just like a crawfish, just that little tick, tick. It's like when they hear it, they come running as far as they can hear it from, and they'll track it down and eat it. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Do you find that color makes a difference at all when you're fishing at night?
No.
Nope. Everybody says black and blue, red and black. Bull crap. No. I've caught them on chartreuse. I've caught them on. I mean, just as long as it's in the water with them, they'll T-bone it like a freaking great white T-bones a seal.
Shad, bluegill, crawfish, they don't change color at night.
So you think scent matters? I mean, not at night, but just overall, like scent matters versus color matters.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I don't think that even matters at night either.
But even like during the day, I found like smallmouth are so dumb and aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, if they can see it and it looks like it should be pretty close to what they should be eating, they're gonna eat it.
Yeah.
Now, I will say aggressiveness. That's something I do want to talk about. Outside of tail race fishing, you're not going to find that hyper aggressiveness like on some of these upland reservoirs. Like when we're dropping on them, or even in winter when we're throwing A-rigs, you'll catch 5 largemouth before you'll catch a smallmouth because that smallmouth wants to follow whatever you're throwing all the way to the boat. And I don't know why they do that. But like, those tail race fish, I think they just live on a treadmill their entire life. They're just, like Caleb said, something comes by their face, they smoke it. But I find it really strange that like our small, they're aggressive, but they're not as aggressive, I think, when other fish are around them. Like if I'm fishing and it's a mixed lake where I'm catching largemouth and smallmouth, it's like the largemouth are the ones to jump on it first. And then you can go, Ben, you experienced this with me. We went down a bank, caught all the largemouth, and I told Ben, I said, we'll go back up this bank and catch the smallmouth because they're a little less aggressive right now. And we went back up the bank and caught all the smallmouth. And I don't know. Again, that's something else I think plays into. I think it's a species difference, not species, but two different a strain difference. I don't know. Have you guys experienced that up there at all?
Yeah, I mean, ours don't get that much, like to that extent on a certain bank. Like if you fish down a bank with a swim jig and you catch a largemouth, like this, you'll catch a smallmouth, a largemouth, a smallmouth, or vice versa. Like they mix.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Casey? Like, are your fish mixing up?
It depends on the structure in the lake. Like if you're on a Champlain or Oneida where there's fish relating to grass, then yeah, they mix up a lot. I mean, I fish tournaments, multiple day tournaments on Oneida where you'll think you're on largemouth and go out and catch a big bag of smallmouth, and then the second day of the tournament you catch a big bag of largemouth, and it's like, what the hell's going on? It's like, how'd that happen? But I think that's more grass related. I mean, those fish are eating perch and crawfish and stuff like that. Well, you know, Great Lakes, obviously they're not doing that. St. Lawrence, they're not doing that. Even the Finger Lakes beyond the spring, they're not doing that. So I think those are for here. It's more grass fish.
One of the craziest things I've witnessed on our tail race fisheries, especially, I've got one rock pile down at Nickajack that I've seen this multiple times, where the current will be running across. It's a little eddy. It's a current break. And there's predatory fish that are sitting there. You know, it's a prime location. But it's weird because it's almost like they're segregated. So you'll be making the same cast. Literally, I'll spot lock in the same spot, and I'll make the same cast for 3 hours. And I'll have nothing for 10 minutes will happen. And then all of a sudden, you'll see the current kind of pushing a little bit different on it. And I'll catch 4 giant drum in a row. And then I'm like, crap, you know, whatever. The current pushes back a little different. I catch 5 big largemouth in a row. Current comes back, and then it's stripers, and then it goes back again, and then it's all smallmouth. Like they're literally segregated by species. And I've seen that in the backs of creeks a lot of time in the summertime. We have these big springs back there, and it's super clear. And I throw swim baits on it. And I've literally watched shoals of big rockfish striper kind of pull up there. They'll kind of swim around it for a minute, be gone, and all of a sudden the largemouth pull back up in there. They're in it, and they're gone. And then there's a few little spotted bass. They're in it, and then they're gone, and then it's striper again. It's like little cycles of the same fish, and they'll do that all day. They'll pull into the creek channel and they'll pull right back around. It's just you can sit there and watch it happen.
Interesting.
That's crazy.
So another thing, something I've noticed down here, I catch, and this is interesting to me because me and Ben have talked about this. I have never once set on any one spot in East Tennessee and caught multiple smallmouth in a row unless I'm in the current.
Yeah.
And they do not school up like the largemouth school up. Like you can go get on a ledge or get on a deep point or even sometimes shallow and catch 20 largemouth in one spot, right? I've never seen smallmouth do that. I'll catch a big, like, it seems like it's one big dominant fish by itself, or I'll catch a bunch in an area, like, you know, in a pocket or, in a stretch. But, like, up there being, like, there's been multiple times that me and you have set in one spot and caught 15. And it's like,
I think the biggest thing up here is our lack of cover and our lack of structure.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're talking glacial bodies of water, because on our river systems they don't do it either. Right? Like smallmouth won't group up on like a small, you know, let's say one small section of there's rock right here. On rivers, not on like Great Lakes or anything attached to the Great Lakes. But like you get to a glacial body of water where it's like a bowl, like beaver, for example.
mm-hmm.
There's one point, and those fish have to sit on that one point in the
Because
lake.
there's nothing else. Yeah.
That cracked me up when we pulled into that lake. I was like, you took us to the pond.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? It's like, I remember when you first pulled up there, I was looking, I was like, so can we go around the corner there? And you're like, no, that's the end of it over there. I'm like,
No,
what?
that's the end of the lake. Like,
Yeah.
we'll put the trolling motor down, and we're going to fish around this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, does this guy know what he's doing? And like my first cast, I hook a big one, and like the third cast I caught a 5.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I guess there's fish here.
and just the stark contrast between, like, I go to Lake Huron one day with him, and I'm like, my God, this is the ocean. And then the next day we go to this place where I can throw a football from one side to the other. And I'm like, what the hell? What are we doing here? Hold on a second. I was catching freaking 6-pounders yesterday. I want to go back there. And Ben's like, no. Just hear me out on this one. There's one grass patch, and it's like right over here.
Yeah, it's definitely a timing thing for us up in the Northeast. I don't know about you, Austin. Welcome back. It seems like you
Yeah,
got
sorry, I
it.
lost my
But this time of year, like it seems like when they're pushing up before the spawn, that they relate pretty hard to whatever structure that we have. So when you catch one, you'll generally most of the time you'll find another. But then once that spawn's over, if you catch one, unless you can keep on that school, they're very nomadic. They're just going to keep moving. Like Casey mentioned earlier, they just move around. They chase bait all summer. So in that summer month time, you catch one. I mean, I've never caught unless you're on the Great Lakes that we have like Ontario or maybe the river. After I catch one, it's pretty tough to find the other because they keep moving. I don't know. What do you think, Casey?
Lake's a lake. I think if you're on one of our bowl-shaped finger lakes, yeah, it's difficult. But if you're on somewhere like Champlain or Oneida or the St. Lawrence, or even Ontario that has some more of that shallower habitat, boulders and rock veins and grass patches, then they're grouped up. They're just in smaller groups. Like, a big group of smallmouth in the post spawn is 10, where in the summertime there might be 100. So I think they have a short period there where they're just in smaller wolf packs in that, 6 to 15 feet, whatever, call it 10, 15 feet of water. And they roam those wolf packs until they get enough energy to move out and then really group up big time in the summertime.
And post spawn, like, are your fish really, really, really tough to catch?
It's that weird transition. I feel like that. Go ahead.
I mean, not overly in a bowl-shaped finger lake where they're very pelagic. Then yes, you might have a short window there where you can catch them on top water, on the grass lines or something, and then those fish are gone. On somewhere like Oneida or Champlain, they're pretty darn easy to catch. But Ontario definitely has a tough post-spawn period where they're not shallow anymore, and they're definitely not deep, so that they can get tough to catch there.
Yeah, like on Huron, man, I mean, I lose them for like a month. Like, I won't even go. Because unless I'm looking at them or I can see the boulders that those fish should be on, like, man, I'm done until they get onto like that 25 to plus foot of water.
Now, why do you think that is? Like, do you have a theory for it, or is it just?
I think they're so spread out that, like, unless you're willing to just constantly stay on the move to look for something, you're gonna have one fish here in 7 foot of water and 2 to 5 fish here in like 14 foot of water. But like, they're very hard to continually catch or pattern because they don't stop on that spot. They just kind of come through there, like sit for a little bit of time to gain some energy and then move back. I mean, they're just trying to feed and get back out to that deep water.
Awesome.
It's just that weird. Even all the species are kind of that transition, either from spring, to summer. That trend, that weird. There's a weird time in there. They don't want to eat. I don't know what it is. It's kind of like lockjaw. It's and then that weird time between summer and fall. It's the same thing. Like, they just kind of get that lockjaw where they don't want to eat. It's just a weird time, and I feel you on that one. It's kind of hard to target them, and if you do catch one, you don't. At least for me, I don't catch another one. It's kind of like very random for me.
Yeah.
That's funny because for us, like our post spawn for smallmouth and largemouth, we have so many other forage species that are going into spawn. So we get these huge shad spawns.
Yeah.
The threadfin start spawning, then the gizzard shad. You've got bluegill, all kinds of panfish spawning in between there, crappie a little bit before all that. And so you can literally just follow those other spawning forage species and get right back up with your predators. But like you guys were saying, you can't really – it's hard to differentiate what species you're going to catch. But I can go out there. There's so many shad here that spawn main lake on these little gravel bars and stuff. You can go out there and just absolutely hammer largemouth and smallmouth main lake on those areas.
And that's crazy, with talking about the shad spawn. Because out here in Cali, like, if you find a shad spawn, you can't catch a fish around them. Like, they're just so focused on that bait where you can't catch them on anything. They're just it's great. It's just, I don't know. It's like, because I've been to the Tennessee. I've been to Chickamauga where the shad spawn's happening, and you can throw a spinnerbait or topwater or crankbait.
Yeah, you just wreck them, in the morning. It's dumb.
Yeah.
You can't control the size of the fish. That is the one tough
No.
part. If you're a tournament angler, like you might go catch 70 fish and you might end up with 25 pounds, and there'll be one giant, a few decent ones, and then like you fill out a limit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They're all together, but it's fun.
Yeah.
These fish are always biting. And like I was saying with that marina bite, a lot of people talk about that really tough time in September, August, like dog days of summer as it's trying to, the lakes and stuff are turning over. Our lakes don't turn over because they have so much current. And those fish just position for whatever reason around the marinas. I still haven't figured that out. There's got to be something going on. I don't know if it's a second shad spawn or...
There's definitely something because me and Caleb, I've talked to you about this. Some of our more tougher, I'd say tougher lakes, definitely. Mountain Hill is probably a lake no one's ever heard of. It's a little bitty tiny lake that connects two ginormous lakes. Yeah, good for them. Don't ever come. If anyone ever says, hey, you want to come fish Mountain Hill, flip them off and walk the other way. But anyway, those lakes, there's something that does happen during that weird dog days of summer where the smallmouth will get in about 25 foot of water and they want to look up. And it is the damnedest thing. You can't get them to bite anything except for a giant topwater. And there's something about those fish that they want to look straight up and they want to come up out of deep water and literally, like a great white on a baby seal, just destroy stuff. And I don't know what's happening there that happens, but it's only marinas and bluff walls that you can get on that bite. And it's just...
The only thing I can think of is the shade. There's a lot of shade in those areas, I mean, obviously it's dog days, it's not like summertime, but they got to be related to that shade.
That's what I think, too. I don't know if it's comfortable to sit during the day there, but that bite really kicks off for me, like, low light. It's early morning and it's late afternoon, and you don't do as much during the midday, which is odd to me. But okay, so here...
It's Tennessee, Caleb. That's what we just need to...
So far underneath the houseboats and stuff that you can't actually catch them midday, because you can't get a top water or anything big that they want back in there. That could be it. And then
hey, Caleb, you want to know my theory on all of your fishing patterans?
What?
Is that it is you and you're doing the weirdest stuff in the possible lake. Like,
yeah.
Like overanalyzing, overthinking.
Yeah. I mean, I've called Caleb before and like, listen, you ain't going to believe this shit. 35 foot of water, whopper plopper, 190 size. You got to throw it out there and burn it back as fast as you can. Smallmouth will unload on it. He's like, all right, that sounds real good. Let me go try that. And he's like, dude, 23 and a half pounds. You ain't going to believe it. And I'm like, dude, I told you. We're both over here like trying to pull shit out of our ass that like no one's ever heard of before because literally, like Tennessee is the weirdest.
Everyone has a bass boat. So
everything's about
like that to be successful. Yeah.
And like yesterday, it was 35, and then it got up to 77. Today it thunderstormed, and tomorrow it's probably gonna be like 90 and snowing. I mean, like who knows? Like it's the craziest you've ever seen.
Good grief. Nice and nice. So an interesting argument that I want to ask your guys' opinions on, because you guys, like I said earlier in the podcast, you fished a lot of different lakes and a lot of bodies of water that have smallmouth. I guess not your favorite lake, but do you think is the smallmouth capital of the world, like the best place to go and catch numbers and quality of smallmouth?
That's easy. Ben lives there.
No, it's St. Clair, man. Like everyone can say St. Lawrence, and St. Lawrence is a factory, but like you could put your boat in the middle of St. Clair and never just have someone drop your boat there, and you could drift around anywhere and catch them.
I think Casey would have a different viewpoint of the river.
Yeah, St. Lawrence is overrated, 100%. But we have 100 places here that are that good too. To me, it's here, but I've never been to Michigan. I got to go to St. Clair for Costa this year, so I'll let you know after, I guess.
Yeah, I gotta say it's north of the Mason-Dixon. Let's put it that way. Those northern fisheries, they're on a different planet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. I mean, I've caught giant smallmouth down here. That's something that we do have is just freakish big smallmouth, but they're hard to catch. But I've never seen anything like stuff that I've done in Michigan on Lake Huron and St. Clair. I can't say much. So one day I went to St. Clair, I didn't catch a freaking fish. So I can't say much about that place. But up north anywhere, I feel like it's smallmouth mecca of the world.
What's
agree.
the world record? What, Dale Hollow? Is that where it's 11 pounds or something like that?
Yeah, 11 pounds.
If you believe it.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
I don't believe it.
Really?
That fish looks like it might have gone 8. But anyway, we could debate that.
So last question before we wrap this thing up here. Not what bait might be the best for catching smallmouth, but your personal favorite way to get on smallmouth. It might not be the most efficient way, but your favorite way, just your personal touch. What are your guys' favorites?
Caleb, do you want to answer for both of us?
Yeah, I'm gonna let you go ahead and steal my answer, Alex. Go ahead and steal my answer, bro.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably answer for me and Caleb both right now. 89,000 to 90,000 units of water coming out of any of the dams around here with a 6-inch swim bait on a 3/4 ounce head and some 20-pound tests and just freaking jacking their faces. There's nothing quite like that.
That or small body crank. I like really catching them cranking too. Just burning a crank as fast as you can do it, and then just trying to take the rod out of your hands. That's pretty fun.
Cool.
Man, I got 2. It's either a 4-inch swim bait, but top water, man. I love top. I mean, just like all you guys, I'm sure you guys all love top water, but just watching the small, big brown ones come up on a spook or something like that is it's so much fun.
Yeah.
So much.
Okay. Ben?
Yeah, dude. So I either like catching them like really like power fishing with like a medium diving crankbait, like a 15-foot diver, or like really finesse with like 6-pound test line and a drop shot. And like a light rod and everything.
Visible eye roll.
Dude, I do. I like catching them out of like 30 foot when I'm like video game fishing.
I know you do.
Seriously though, all right. So you river guys, a technique that I've been killing them on the last few years that's been dynamite is a Nico rig. Nico rig, because it keeps you out of the rocks. Like our tail races, you get hung so much. You throw that Nico rig on there, and you can drift it down and keep it in some of these areas. Like, oh man, it's dynamite.
Casey?
Oh man, every one of them. I like dropping on them. That's fun, but I like catching them on top, watching them blow up at Champlain and Oneida. I like dragging in the current at the St. Lawrence when the rod just gets heavy and pulls back. I like swim baiting them on a big swim bait.
I like Casey. He's just like, I like fishing. I just want to catch it. I like it.
If it's big and it's brown and it chomps down on my bait, that's a hell of a good time.
I like it.
I don't care what it bites. I'll take anything. Other than a damn Nico rig, you ain't gonna find me throwing that. No way.
No, it's like a Senko, man. I am not touching a Senko. If a smallmouth won't eat anything but a Senko, I will never catch one again in my life.
I didn't say I was throwing a Senko. Sometimes I throw a trick worm. I throw crawl baits on it. It's just the main thing is the Nico rig because it keeps you from getting hung. Those tail race fisheries, the current's running so strong. It's like fishing a trout stream, trying to drag a football jig in a trout stream. Like you're going to get hung every cast. You try to fish anything on the bottom when they're running 80,000 cc's. I mean, you're going to get hung as soon as you touch the bottom. So that's the one thing that you'll hang a drop shot every cast, but that plastic will float over top of the rocks.
I'm a little bit favorable to the football jig recently, but I love a good jerkbait bite.
I wish I could get a football jig and then tail race to go anywhere. If you want to go through about $50 worth of football jigs in 20 minutes, I got a place that we could do that.
Yeah, you want to lose some stuff, just call me. We'll go lose some stuff. Maybe break some stuff too while we're at it.
Yeah.
I have a serious question. Where is the next world record smallmouth going to be caught? Or is it ever going to be broken because it's 12 pounds?
North Alabama.
North Alabama.
Northern Alabama. Wheeler, Pickwick. I've seen this year alone, there were, I think, 26 smallmouth caught over 8 pounds.
Wow.
See, I know of 3 over 9 caught on Nick and Jack just weighed in tournaments last year. Like, honestly, some of our lakes down here are probably your best chance to catch a true trophy smallmouth. Like, just doing the numbers, the amount that are caught down here, I honestly think if you want to catch a smallmouth over 8 pounds, you're better off being somewhere on the Tennessee River than being up north. But overall, I think northern fisheries are better.
Yeah, I mean, to catch like a 6, you're better off up here, but to catch like an
absolutely.
8+,
Yeah.
like to catch a 7+, you're better off down there.
Realistically, all it takes is a smallmouth getting about 26 inches long and eating 1 or 2 more extra gizzard shad, and you've got a freaking 12-pounder. I mean, no kidding. I mean, these fish they're freaks in nature. They don't even look real. Like you see them, and it's like the spotted bass on Bullard's Bard. You're like, those damn things are photoshopped because they're just. I mean, their heads don't even look right. They're just. It's crazy.
Especially Wilson and Piglet.
Mm-hmm.
There's something special about that. Nick and Jack pops them off every once in a while, and Watts Bar pops them off. You know, there was like 6 of them over 8 in Watts Bar last year that I heard about.
Yeah.
They're there. It's
just catching them.
I mean, I know of multiple over 8-pound smallmouth that have been caught out of chick.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that or some little bitty, just no-name creek. I mean, I can't tell you how many kayak floats I've done where these smallmouth, literally, I don't think they've ever seen human beings because nobody's messing with them. And, like, you're going to places where it's all private property as far as the eye can see, and unless you know old Jim Bob, you know, and you ain't going to get shot, you can go float this river.
Still
and
might get shot.
Yeah, and, like, you know, the TWA's floating these places, and they're shocking up freaking 9-pound smallmouth because nobody can touch them. They're just living there and turning into freaks of nature.
Yeah.
Okay, Casey, I'm curious if you'll agree with me on this or not, but I think Lake Erie could pump it out just because there's the vast amount of fish and big fish caught with the amount of area that they can cover. I don't know. That's my personal opinion.
I don't know. I don't think you're going to see it break a world record, but I think you're going to see the New York state record broken probably in the next year or two. I would be very surprised if they don't break it that sooner. I mean,
do you think it'll happen in the actual? Sorry,
Bailey, we know a guy who caught one within a couple ounces 2 weeks ago. You know?
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me. Like, we talk about 9s. You know, we've all heard about 9-pound smallmouth, but the amount that you hear about that are double-digit smallmouth, I mean, I think I've heard of like 3 from different guys, and it's like, I know a guy who knew a guy who went to Dale Hollow with a spinning rod and a hair jig and caught a 10-3. You know what I mean? Like, you don't hear about 10s, and so how in the heck are you going to catch one that's over 11?
Well, because like a 6-pounder is like a 10-pound largemouth.
Exactly.
I mean,
it'd be like catching a 25-pounder.
Yeah, it's like catching a 20. You got to think a double digit is really like catching a 19 to 20-pound largemouth bass.
Yeah.
So, do you guys think
your trophy
that
program, Ben? They need to grow them for us.
they need a trophy program?
I want to go back to Casey's point though, because like, do you think it'll be caught out of Erie, or will be caught out of like one of the rivers that connect to Erie, or is it going to be caught like? Because my concern, and I fished, so Saginaw Bay connects to Lake Huron, right? So if you look at Michigan, it's this part of like the thumb. In that shallower water, I've seen a lot of big fish, but I've never seen one over like. I've seen 1 over 7, right? Like I've heard of 1 over 7. Is it going like? Is there so much nature going on out there, right? Like so much current, so much like so many different things going on that those fish can't grow that big. But you look at where all these state records are being caught, they're out of like the rivers that connect to Burton Mullet and like Hubbard Lake.
I mean, we're still never going to touch the world record, but I think the New York state record, I mean, it's going to be Erie or the St. Lawrence / Ontario. I mean, a guy tied it out of the St. Lawrence 2 years ago with
How
a
big is that?
freakish looking fish. I think it's 8.2.
It's 8.4.
8.4 is the New York state record. 8.4. So a guy tied it a couple years ago.
Which I'm shocked by, dude. I'm shocked that it's that small. Not like that's a small fish, but like that those places pump out so many big fish.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't get those giant ones up here. Like, I've never even caught 1 over 7, and I've caught millions of bass on some of the best smallmouth places in the world, and I've never caught 1 over 7. So we just don't get them. And what I find too is you don't get those freakish big ones in these giant schools. Like the guy who caught the one that was 8.4, he was fishing a TBF tournament. He had 4 fish. So it's not like he was around some mother load of 100 fish and he caught that one out of it. And that's what I say to my buddies is those fish I don't think live in those kind of groups because it takes so much to feed those fish that, I just don't think it's going to come like that. It's going to come by a guy walleye fishing with live bait or something crazy, a guy trout fishing in open water. I don't know. It's going to be something weird like that.
It's like the Michigan State record. Michigan State record, a guy caught on a night crawler and a worm off of his dock, just cast it out with a beer in his hand.
Right.
I've never caught a 7, and this dude catches a 9.9.
Wow. Right. Austin, what are the sizes of smallmouth that y'all have on West Coast? I'm curious about that because I'm out of touch with that.
They're pretty small. I mean, compared to what you guys have back east,
Yeah.
4-pounder is a really good one. 5 and 6s are massive. My really good buddy of mine, his brother caught 9. But other than that, like our smallies back over here are relatively small.
Yeah. What's your state record?
I think it's 8 something, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. Let me. I have to look that up.
Yeah.
Sure.
I can look it up right here.
We have most of our one of our lakes real
9
close
pounds.
To largemouth, is 18 pounds. Someone caught it trolling for trout. But obviously it's not. We're not talking about largemouth.
The California state record smallmouth is 9 pounds 13 ounces.
9.30. I thought it was for some reason.
That's ridiculous.
24, almost 25 inches long.
What did they caught it? Party, say? Lake Party?
I'm not sure.
See that.
It doesn't
Casey,
say it.
I want to touch on something you said about the rogue fish. I don't think you're going to catch a smallmouth when you're around like a big pot of fish. I have this concept for a video where I want to shoot. It's called Seeking Bronze 7. I want to go out and try to catch a 7-pounder. And one of the biggest things that I have to take my mindset and shift is, okay, if I'm catching a bunch of fish in an area, especially if they're like 4 to 5 pounds, I have to leave those fish as much as I don't want to because I know that 6-pounder is sitting like 200 yards away from that. Or that 7-pounder is sitting like outside of those fish, picking up the rogue bait fish outside of it. Where like I really believe, especially even largemouth, like those giant fish are not sitting with all of those other, smaller class fish.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of days that have been really, really, really good up here, and you catch 6-pounders, 6.5. I mean, I caught one. The biggest one I've ever caught was 6.91, and that was in a big school of fish. I mean, caught a lot of fish that day out of that school. So there's big fish there, but I think that completely freakish one is not. It's off with less fish. Maybe you don't even fish the area repeatedly because there's not a giant load of fish there, so you wouldn't go back over and over. So that's why I think someone's gonna, I don't want to say by accident, it might be a guy fishing for smallmouth. I don't think it's gonna be a guy that's catching 100 fish in a day and they're all 4 and 5s or 3 to 5s, and then all of a sudden there's a 9-pounder in there. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Do you have a theory? Do any of you guys have a theory as to why you think that fish would be outside of that school, not with the majority? Yeah. Like Ben, because you're going after this with the whole idea of getting away from the fish to go catch just one big fish. Do you have a theory as to why they act that way?
So here's my thought. Like your grandma when she gets really sad and she's like sitting there and she's telling you, hold on, listen to me. Grandma's sitting there, she's really sad, and she's like, man, I outlived all my friends. Like, that's his fish. He's done. He's outlived all of his friends. They've all died off, and he's sitting there trying to get the biggest meal he can possibly get because he's fat and stupid. Like, he's lived for 25, 30 years.
And I think it's nature.
To hang with, right? Like, he is the aggressive predator in that area, the apex.
Yeah, and that's his nature, right? I mean, like, you look at the most giant of anything ever. right? They're always by themselves. There's something about becoming that big that I don't know if you just, you're pressured out. Different species, there's going to be completely different, reasons why. But like you look at the biggest great whites ever tagged, they just live by themselves out in the middle of the damn ocean, eating freaking whatever the hell they want to eat, right? They're huge. And I think these smallmouth are the same way. They just get so freaking big and they just wander around out in the middle of Erie, right? I mean, Erie and these Great Lakes, they're like the ocean. And I mean, these fish can literally live in an area where no human being will ever see them. And when a 10-inch perch swims by, they're just like, I'll have that. And they're just freaks. They're freaks of nature, man.
I think it's a territory thing. It's just like those big fish. We talked about this when we did that swim bait panel the other day, big swim bait panel. Big fish, it's just like when Ben and I, the first time, or I think it was the second time we went to Beaver, and I was talking about throwing that swim bait. We could pretty much call our shots with that big swim bait on where that giant smallmouth was going to be. Because Small Lake, there's a few key structure areas. It's like if there's a big fish within this 5 acres of the lake, she's going to own that space. Well, when you're talking about a huge fish like that, it's an old fish. It's a relatively smart fish. Sometimes it's hard to get that one to bite. So she's probably there. It's just that you're not going to get that bite necessarily every time.
Yeah, Alex, I think you make a really good point on that's just nature because, like, coming from my side of things, my family is also huge into hunting. And mature bucks, that biggest class of bucks. I don't know how much experience you guys have with hunting, but the biggest deer aren't killed where the majority of deer are going to be. You have to think completely out of the box differently. If they've lived that long, there's a reason why, and it's not because they're doing commonplace things where you see most, of those bucks or those deer move. I think that's kind of, in general, I think, as Alex said, that's just nature. I think a lot of species do that. It's just, obviously, we don't notice it as much.
It's natural selection at its finest. The biggest and the baddest MFer in the lake lives, and the rest of them die. And, I mean, that's just the way it is. They've done something their entire life to make sure that they're alive.
That's why the grandma analogy threw me off.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there like, Ben's grandma must be, like, smoking a Cuban with, like, tattoos everywhere. Like, yeah, y'all get off my couch.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's the grandma I imagine when I think about that 10-pound smallmouth.
That's funny. Well, I don't have any more topics to bring up. Is there any last remarks you guys have or any questions you want to bring up before we hop off here?
Yeah, what's your best big fish smallmouth bait?
I've only caught 2 over 5, and they both came off of a football jig, so that's all I got.
So, like, dragging slow.
Essentially, yeah.
I'll tell you guys what, most of the giant fish around me, especially on nickajack, get caught on, like your over 8s, over 9s, get caught on a 1 ounce, 3/4 ounce, 1.5 spinnerbait with double willow leaf, big willow leaf blades. That's
and
daytime
it's
and
moving,
night.
right?
Daytime.
Reacting.
Yeah.
That's me too. So that's why I find it super interesting. I mean, like, my biggest fish ever came on a 6 cents 300 DD, like a 15, 17-foot diving crankbait. Like, just burning that thing as fast as I can possibly move it. My second biggest came on a jerkbait, like fishing it as fast as I possibly can.
Yeah, mine's the same.
I think if they pay attention to the bait, like, I don't catch a big one that's like looking at the bait and trying to inspect it because they know it's not right.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest smallmouth in Tennessee before I went up north was, 5 pounds. And I caught a lot of 5-pounders since then, and every single one of them's been on a jerkbait. And then when I went up north, my 514 that I caught came on a jerkbait. It's something, but it's a jerkbait too. That's a completely different topic for a completely different day. I think that's next to a glide bait, one of the most powerful baits in your box.
I think it's funny.
Or a marabou hair jig.
Everyone makes fun of me because I fish a lipless crankbait way too much. But my biggest Tennessee smallmouth and my biggest Michigan smallmouth, I both come on a lipless. Both come on an LB500, actually. Ripping that thing, yo-yoing it.
The LB500 straight catches them everywhere.
Dude,
It's so special. That bait, Caleb made me realize how special that thing is.
Dude, we had an epic day after a tough day with that thing.
Another good one, just in case you've never fished it, a Duo Vibe 68. It's a lot like the LV, but, dude, it is so small and so compact.
Those things are
I love it.
too. Those
All
duos.
right, Casey, you're being
Yeah,
too
Casey.
quiet. I got to hear yours.
Casey's like, please don't ask me.
It's-
Please don't ask me.
It's a Nico.
I like Casey too because he's sitting there
Yeah,
like
it's
really
a Nico.
analyzing and listening, and I'm like just waiting for him to drop some like gem of knowledge from like way deep. Like I'm gonna hold on, I gotta write that down.
No, probably between on Erie, a tube, honestly. I mean, a million really big ones on a tube, or just like a Kitech swim bait, something like that. The biggest ones I've ever caught have been on that. The biggest bags I've ever caught have probably been on that. So, Kitech swim bait, A-rig, tube, Ned rig lately too. I've thrown the crap out of a Ned rig the last few years.
Now, when you're retrieving a tube, I know like cracking a tube is like a big thing, but dude, I've caught so many giants, like just dragging it as slow as I possibly can move my arm with a tube.
Yeah, I don't like that's the deal Zona does where he cracks it, and I don't have much going on with that. I just drag the thing around like it's a shoe on the bottom.
And you can't feel anything. You just pray. You just know you're in the right area.
I've got a pattern for you guys to try. It works dynamite for smallmouth and largemouth here. A lot of guys do it. Nobody talks about it, but we actually throw a tube on heavier line, and we throw it like a lot of guys do a swim jig, where you keep it high in the water column and you're moving your rod tip. You actually keep it where you can see it, and it's like a bait fish. You throw like a smoke, you throw a pearl, and you keep it up in the water column, and they cannot lay off of that thing because the way that undulates. But you're literally just your rod tip's doing this the whole time, and you're keeping it where you can see it with a lighter weight. It's the stupidest thing. It sounds stupid, but I'm telling you, you'll smash them on it.
It's unrelated, Caleb, but like, what is it with the Alabama shake? Because you get like north of Mason-Dixon and below like Georgia, and why are guys looking like they're like half stroking out when they're throwing a swim jig bait?
It just works.
It does, yeah.
It's funny. Someday, I mean, I don't do that purposefully unless it's absolutely killing it. Like when I get a swim jig, I start throwing it both ways. If they'll eat it on a regular retrieve, I'm going to throw it a regular retrieve because that'll wear you out doing that. You better have a light rod is all I got to say.
I'll never forget.
Because like,
I was fishing with
Schmitty-
Ben. Well, I was fishing with Ben one day, and he goes, dude, why are you moving so much? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, dude, you're like twitching like you're on crack. And I'm like, bro, I'm just fishing. He's like, no, you're twitching and popping and moving and cracking and ripping and dipping. And I'm like, well, it catches fish. Leave me alone. I don't know.
Yeah, so I was really, really lucky to fish with Brian Schmidt or like help him with his video stuff last year. And dude is a hammer with a swim jig. And one of the biggest things I noticed is his ability just to reel that thing and use his rod to move that bait. And then you look at these Alabama guys who are equally successful with a swim jig or very successful with one, and they just twitch constantly. But like, I love fishing a swim jig, but I just straight retrieve it and like throw pops in with my hands versus these dudes who are like shaking the crap out of that thing fishing a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 the heaviest.
I got a theory on that. Okay, so especially when those fish are feeding on something very high in the water column or they're very shallow, when you're twitching that bait, you're popping it with your rod tip up, and it's lifting in the water column and dropping down. So you can keep that within a certain area a lot better. It's like walking a spook, right? You can keep that in one area in the strike zone, a smaller area. So if you're fishing around wood during the shad spawn, if you're fishing in the tail race and the fish are really close to the edge of the bank, it's just staying right there. And it's drifting with the current. It's doing what it's supposed to do. You're not pulling it out of the strike zone very fast. It's just staying high in the water column where they want to see it, and it's staying almost in one place, but it's going crazy. It's like, I think once it gets in their space, it's spazzing out so much they just can't help but have to kill it.
And are you fishing like a 1/4 or 3/8 most?
In the tail race, it's usually like a 1/4. If I'm doing that with, with a swim jig. If I'm doing it with a tube, I'm using like an 1/8 ounce.
Okay.
And I use straight braid. I'll use straight like 15-pound or 20-pound braid.
I think I've been thinking about it a lot, but like it makes a lot more sense fishing a 1/4 or 3/8 where I'm fishing a 3/8 or half, and I'm straight retrieving that thing real slow, right? Like I want that thing to float, and so I want to put like a kicking trailer on there that's holding that bait higher in the column, right? And you're just using the rod to keep that bait higher.
Yeah, using the rod, and I use a bigger trailer too, because a lot of times when I'm doing that technique, like I'll be on a grass edge, I'll be fishing laydowns, I'll be fishing around docks, and it's just like that thing. It stays there. It's moving and it's a reaction bite, but it's staying there in their space too awkwardly long. You know what I mean? They're just like, if they're on the fence, they're like, okay, that thing is just it's chilling out too. I gotta kill it.
I feel that. Dude, when you said too awkwardly long, I thought of that guy that comes in for the handshake and holds your hand just too long, and you're like,
oh gosh, Grandma
sorry.
God, man.
Hey, it is a regret getting us 3 on here because we will go off on tangents. I just want you to know that. Next thing you know, we're gonna be talking about like freaking prehistoric smallmouth and how we think the fossil record can help us catch fish.
Sorry, I was really curious on that.
I love it.
The quarantine's getting to me now. I could talk about this 3 hours.
Any last questions, topics we want to bring up before we hop off here? All right, cool. I just want to say thank you to all you guys though, just for taking the time and to hop on here and talk about this. I know this is a subject I think we're all excited to talk about. So this was a blast. I think this is one. Hopefully we can take this podcast, Alex, and send it to a biologist and be like, hey, get to work. You got some homework to do.
Listen, I got a guy. He's a TWA guy, so he's Tennessee biologist. But I'm going to have him on one of my podcasts here before too long, and I'm going to reach out to everybody and just get a list of questions. And we may have to do 4 or 5 episodes, but I would just want to ask him every question that you could think about, like the actual biology of a bass. And I think he's going to actually get me hooked up with the guy who specifically does largemouth, smallmouth, and spots. And he's just a big research guy for all that stuff. So hopefully we can ask all kinds of questions. You know what I mean?
That'd be
sweet. That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys again, and hope you guys are staying safe, staying healthy, and hopefully all this is over soon, so we can. Hopefully, Casey, you can go back, and you and Austin go back to fishing tournaments.
Yeah.
So get back.
I'm ready to fish a tournament.
Yeah, same here.
When does that start? Boys. Like up in New York, when can you start fishing tournaments in Austin? What are you doing for tournaments this year?
Well, this year I'm fishing Wild West Bass Trail. It's pretty similar to, I guess, the Costas. It's a little bit cheaper, but the same payout, and it's around $850 for a pro, and then like $300 for an am. But it pays out $30,000 for
that's awesome
place. Yeah. So and then I'm picking and choosing on the Costas this year. Still kind of figuring out kind of sponsors because I would like to fish the tour again. That's kind of where obviously I had a great time last year, and obviously I requalified last year. I just didn't have the finances to keep going. So that's definitely the goal is to fish the Costas to qualify. But as of right now, I'm just fishing Wild West and just a few open tournaments.
That's sweet.
Awesome.
And Casey, when do you guys open up in New York?
We open the 3rd Saturday in June, but we're starting to have a lot more preseason tournaments like catch, weigh, release stuff. They're doing a bunch of guys are doing different forms of that. So I'm actually fishing one in 2 weeks. I think Bailey said he's going to fish it too on Cayuga. It's just a local club, so it's all members of the club, trustworthy guys, and go out. They give everybody a certified scale, and you gotta weigh. You gotta video your fish on the scale, take a picture of it, and then record your own weights. It's a team format, so there's a little bit of a trust deal there, but they keep it to a refined group. And then there's a few straight MLM tournaments going on. I've stayed away from those because you get guys from all over that, you don't know who's trustworthy. A guy who has 12 pounds all summer long has friggin' 76 pounds and weighing his own fish. So it's like, I'm not going to monkey with that. But yeah, we don't start till 3rd Saturday in June. I actually don't have a Costa until the last 2 years. I haven't had a Costa until mid-July. I got a ways to go still for anything, sizable.
When is St. Clair?
September, mid-September.
Oof. That'll be fun.
Well, listen, hey, y'all want to fish a tournament? Just come on down to Tennessee. We're having 75 and 100 boat tournaments every damn week. So they're like coronavirus my ass. We fishing, boys. You show up with 150 boats at the boat ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah, they shut our asses right down. Up here, we couldn't even launch the damn boats for a couple weeks. I know it was the same in Michigan, but
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. I fished right through it. Screw that. I ain't set my ass on the ramp. That's ridiculous.
Hey,
They
man.
threatened to do that here in Tennessee. I literally hooked my boat up and I drove it to my grandfather's lake house. And I was like, I got my truck with my construction wrapping on. I was like, I'm going to take my essential butt over there and drop my boat in and go fishing, whatever. You know, it don't matter what they say.
that's great.
Love it.
Love it.
All right, guys. Well, again, thank you. Appreciate y'all, and stay safe. We'll talk to y'all soon.
All right, dudes.
See you guys.
See ya.
Yeah.
Well, I just gotta say that was insane. That was a blast. Like the amount of information that was being spit back and forth was just incredible. So, if for all you guys watching or listening to this, I hope you listen to the entire thing because there is a lot of valuable information that came from that. We got a lot of on that podcast. There were experts from each region who know how to catch these brown fish that we love so dearly, and catch them well. Catch them not just now and then, but often, and big ones too. So they know what they're doing. They're all hammers in their own region. So these guys know what's up. Go follow them down in the description. All their profiles. You do not want to miss out on that. But you need to take their advice and the things that these guys say. Take it. And actually implement that to your skills that you put out in the water. You can translate these things, and it's awesome to critically think with these guys. All of our brains together. That we're some goofballs, but at the same time, there's some serious conversation with valuable input that can be put into this. Which this podcast was incredible. It was probably the most fun I've had for an hour and a half of just talking about bass, which was a blast. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, this was incredible. The amount of information that came out of this. Drop a comment down below, whichever application platform that you're watching, listening from. If you're listening from an application that you can't leave a comment, message me over Facebook or Instagram. Not only just hear the feedback on the podcast in general, but just what these guys have done as well. From Ben, Alex, Caleb, Casey, Austin. So that they can get that message. Go follow them down in the description, shoot them a message as well. And all these guys are great guys that will be willing to help you catch more fish. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Go follow these guys again for the third time. Go follow. They are the most genuine guys in the industry, and they're all hammers. So go follow them, and then also subscribe to the Ike Outdoors YouTube channel. Follow me on social media at Serious Angler on Instagram and Facebook. And if you don't want to, watch this on YouTube, you can listen to the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Angler app. Pretty much, I think there's like 10 total applications that you can listen to Serious Angler. So I appreciate you guys watching and for listening. We'll see you next time.